The Packers' initial 53-man roster is out, so I wanted to go through it step by step and kind of react to some of the oddities and nuances of the roster so far this year. So no surprises at the quarterback position. Jordan Love, Sean Clifford, as we expected. Running backs, as I kind of thought, we did keep 3, and that third was Emmanuel Wilson. He did have a really good preseason and training camp and really made a name for himself in that process. At receiver, we did keep 6, not 7. That 7th would have been probably Grant Dubose, but we kept Watson, Reed, Wicks, Heath, Toure, and Dobbs. Then at the tight end and fullback positions, kind of interchange here. We got DeGuara, Kraft, and Musgrave. No surprises there. I would have personally kept Austin Allen, but he's there released, potentially going to be grabbed by the practice squad. Don't be surprised if, based on waivers, though, who other people are releasing out there. There's a few names already, tight end from Denver, for instance, that are out there that might be on Green Bay's target list to potentially go after. And we'll get into where they're going to have some room to do something like that in a little bit. But moving on to the offensive line, we kept Tom, Walker, Bakhtiari, Newman, Myers, Jones, Nyman, Jenkins, Ryan, Runyon, and Tenuta. The surprise to me on this one was Luke Tenuta, mostly just because of the injury nature of it. Now, if it looks like it's going to be a longer-term thing, he might be one of those guys that he's on the initial 53, so he can be put on IR to return later in the season. If he would have went on IR beforehand, he would have been crippled and just lost for the season. So maybe a little bit of freedom there as far as roster moves go. Onto the defensive side, on the defensive line, we've got Slayton, Wyatt, Wooden, Brooks, Clark, and Jonathan Ford. Jonathan Ford was the surprise one a little bit here, only just from a numbers game. He had a really, really nice preseason. If you haven't seen the video that had some of the top graded PFF grades for the Packers this preseason, he was on that list. Really stood out as a pass rusher and a run defender as well. So great to have him on the roster, but just wasn't expecting it personally just because of the numbers game. At the edge position, we've got Hollins, Gary, Enigbari, Cox Jr., Van Ness, and Preston Smith. I think what a lot of us expected there, though, the one that would have been maybe a surprise would have been Brenton Cox, just because of the fact that he's an undrafted free agent, but he performed really nicely and really earned a spot on this roster. At inside linebacker, we've got Walker, Carpenter, Wilson, McDuffie, and Campbell. Not a big surprise there. I really did like what Eric Wilson put together this preseason, another guy that was high on that PFF rated list. Cornerbacks, now there's a little bit of a surprise. Going in with 4 really kind of tells me that Eric Stokes is hopefully going to be on the mend sooner than later. So rolling with 4 is a little bit of a risk, but I mean, we haven't seen what the practice squad is going to look like yet, and there's got to be some guys going through waivers and whatnot. But I would expect to see a couple cornerbacks on that practice squad, and then early in the season, call them up. They can be called up to 3 times before they have to be kept on the active roster. So you can pull a guy up, even rotate different guys based on who we're playing, and have a 5th cornerback active for those games in case of an emergency. I would have kept Innis Gaines because of his versatility in that slot to be able to play that kind of role, and then his value as a special teamer, but he ended up being one of the guys that got cut. At safety, kind of similar to how I predicted, except they cut a different guy than I would have. So they've got Levitt, Ford, Savage, Owens, and Anthony Johnson Jr. Moore being the guy that was cut. So I would have personally cut Jonathan Owens because he did not perform particularly well. But this might be a spot where you look at Tarvarius Moore's injury and question a little bit how severe was that injury that he had to his knee, and then maybe that's something that plays a factor in the decision to cut him rather than cut Owens, for instance. And then for specialists, only 2 spots left. So we've got Anders Carlson and Daniel Whelan. It's interesting that they cut both of the long snappers. I don't think that's an indication of their quality. It was reported that they're expected to sign Matt Orzik back onto the active roster on Wednesday. So we'll see if that that goes through, but just got to get some guys on the active roster to potentially put on IR and then move from there. But I'd be interested to see what you guys thought about this initial 53-man roster that the Packers put together. Who was the biggest surprise for you on this active roster, and who was the biggest surprise that got cut? Let me know in the comments down below, and we'll see you in the next video.